We love a good bookish event in the publishing community, but can readers create bookish events, book signings, balls, galas, all of those things around a book series that they love without it being copyright infringement? Let's talk to a lawyer.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that's dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Tony, when it comes to the book world, we love a good event, and we love when these are created in a bookish atmosphere, when they're created around some of the books and characters that we love. But can readers create bookish events around the books that they love without that being copyright infringement?
This is a really good question, and it kind of toes almost into the world of like fan fiction, if you will, and we've talked plenty about that. But it's really going to depend on a number of factors. But I think the most important one being, are you creating organically an event that incorporates almost all the elements of, let's say, a book series or a franchise. So, for example, if you wanted to make a book series or a bookish gala or something surrounding Hunger Games, could that be something that is permitted? Like you can, create characters or events that maybe are derived in the book and incorporate that in the real world. Ironically enough, this I think almost happened actually, or if not, did happen with Bridgerton. With I think they had a gala of some sort, but the caveat was that was actually authorized by Netflix and the publisher that had published the Bridgerton book series. So I think that's the key here, right? You have to do something that I think would have been vetted or approved by the original copyright holders in order to carry those types of events. And the reason is because at the end of the day, what you are using are copyrighted elements of those specific books of that specific series. You didn't create those characters, you didn't create those events, you didn't create those settings. So realistically, if you want to use those, and let's add another caveat to it, you're making money off of it, but let's say with ticket sales and merch, and hey, maybe part of the ticket price covers a meal of some sort, all of that just screams commercial intent. So that's something that could easily be a portion afforded as a royalty to the original copyright holder, while the organizer could retain the remainder. That's obviously going to raise a red flag in a lot of ways, but I would say primarily from that perspective, the lack of royalty for the original copyright holder. So when it's all said and done, I think that's the kind of thing where it likely will dip into copyright infringement territory. Now that said, I think where you kind of tiptoe that line, and I think it's not really infringement worthy, is if, like, let's say we're talking about a party, maybe something a little bit less public, maybe something within an inner circle where you're using already existing assets out there to make a party. So, like, for example, I'm automatically thinking of birthday parties that maybe are themed to a book series like Harry Potter, or even let's say the Hunger Games, or maybe any other sort of bookish birthday party that you could think of. Those would likely, if you're organizing that birthday party, if you will, it's a little bit more closed. It's not really out there in the public. You're not really marketing it to be like open to everybody. There really isn't any commercial intent because I've never heard of anyone selling tickets for a birthday party, which would be kind of clever and mean. But we live in these times, and inflation's crazy.
That's true.
So maybe that happens, but realistically, there's not going to be like a ticket price you have to pay for entry to a party. And better yet, you're buying, let's say, good party goods from a party city or from wherever you buy party supplies, and you're just putting on the walls. You're setting up tables. You have little maybe plates or utensils, things like that. That I know is actually going to be totally fine. But it's when you're creating more ornate kind of productions, so like broader scale type of balls or galas or dance events or something like that are themed to a book, that's where it's probably going to raise more of a red flag. And I will say this as kind of like a parallel example. Anybody, speaking of Bridgerton, actually, anybody that knows from way back in 2021, 22 may remember Baron Barlow, and they had the Bridgerton musical series. And that was a wide success to the point that they won a Grammy, and they ended up starting to organize a tour around the country to perform their Bridgerton musical, and they called it the unofficial Bridgerton musical. And obviously, they used the words unofficial to connote that they had no affiliation whatsoever with the book series, with the author, or even with Netflix. And Netflix obviously got a hold of it, and they sued for copyright infringement. And it never flourished into a full-fledged trial. They actually ended up settling with prejudice, meaning that they can't bring this lawsuit back. They settled for an undisclosed amount, but we haven't heard of a unofficial Bridgerton musical since then. So odds are they probably killed that project because Netflix likely saw the commercial viability with a project like that. And it was done all the while without the, proper approvals from Shondaland, from Netflix,
Mhm.
from the original author of Bridgerton. So that I think is a kind of a good case study that I think plays a good parallel to something like this. So if you want a takeaway, if you want kind of like a core lesson, you're probably going to have to ask for permission to use someone else's IP to organize a pretty fanciful event, because at the end of the day, what you may not realize you're doing is that you're taking someone else's intellectual property and you're claiming it as your own, or profiting off of that intellectual property, and that's where obviously it raises some broader, legal and ethical concerns.
Okay, let's put a little spin on this because one of the things that we see a lot in association with these types of events is cosplayers. So let's say we have an event that we're not necessarily marketing as something connected to a book or from a book or related to a book, but we are advertising that you can meet the characters because cosplayers will be in attendance specifically to that event as part of the marketing. Talk to me about that.
So the world of cosplay is such a quagmire of complexity, even in and of itself. And I think, I think at one point, and I'm speaking as someone who's gone to quite a few Comic Cons. I think at one point, maybe there were companies that frowned upon cosplayers because they were making money off of, take a photo with the guy that's dressed like Iron Man, or take a photo with the guy that looks like Goku from Dragon Ball Z, or take a picture with someone that looks like Captain Jack Sparrow. And they're marketing off of the likeness that is portrayed of a character that's in a mainstream movie or television show. I think, if in having seen the evolution of Comic Cons across the country and just the cosplay culture, I think that brands have become more aware of how popular it is of like a community, and they've actually embraced it more times than not. I mean, I can't recall the last time I saw Marvel like dip into the whole world of cosplay so emphatically as I saw it from last Comic Con, where they literally dedicated so many posts to people dressed up as everybody's favorite superheroes. And finally, I think that it kind of showcases that, cosplayers are kind of just everyday fans. They're just appreciating the art. And I think brands have come to terms with the fact that there may not be like some improprietary, intent in dressing up as a character. It's just more so their appreciation of the art. Now, that said, um, you're still going to deal with some intellectual property owners that cover their IP, that really don't want some misappropriate use of it. And that's probably where you're going to raise some, some alarm bells, and maybe you may get a cease and desist from from a publisher, or from an entity saying that your cosplay activity is qualifies as copyright infringement. So, and I actually think of a great example of that happened 2 summers ago, when the Elvis movie came out, and literally for years, Vegas was filled with Elvis chapels, people cosplaying as Elvis and minding their own business and getting people married with the worst Elvis accents known to mankind. And out of the blue, the Elvis Presley Enterprises, the estate of Elvis Presley, came out of the woodworks and went after every single Vegas chapel that had an Elvis incorporated element to it, and sued them, or at least it said that they were committing personality right infringement for using the post-mortem personality rights of all these different all these different renditions of Elvis, skinny Elvis, fat Elvis, what have you. And it blossomed to a whole widespread coverage across the entire news cycle. All these Vegas chapels have been affected and may have to close their doors as a result of these cease and desist. Turns out that all the while, what EBG, Authentic Brands Group, the agency that was representing the Elvis estate, all they wanted was a license agreement, and they worked it out. So all these Vegas chapels are operating and up and running. They have not shut down, but every time someone asks for an Elvis oriented wedding, ABG, the Elvis estate, gets a portion of the profits, and the Vegas chapel gets another portion of it. So you're going to get those types of scenarios, I think, more likely than not, where they don't want you to necessarily shut down, but figure out how can you work with them. And I think that's just the reality of the times. I think, we live in this age of social media, people loving to cosplay, people flaunting it and showing it off. But, I think it does tiptoe that world of just appreciation versus just what could be infringement. This is irrespective, though. I really feel like I need to make this disclaimer, though. This is completely irrespective of fan fiction. That is a totally different ball game. If you're literally using someone else's copyrighted work to create derivative works off of that to make your own version of a story, that is textbook definition copyright infringement. That's not what I'm talking about here. This is a completely different ball game, and I think it's important to make that necessary distinction.
And we do have episodes on that, which we will link down below for you. You do not want to miss these episodes. There's a full playlist with Tony, so make sure you're checking that out and dropping your questions on the legal side of the publishing space. Now, if you are going to be creating an event, or you have the hope and aspiration of creating an event, it is really, really, really well worth your time and effort to get a lawyer involved in this, not just to make sure you have the clearances to use the things you want to, but because this involves paperwork. If people are buying tickets, if they are going to come and have expectations, if you are going to be creating something, you need to have terms of service and all of these things that you need to keep yourself legally protected and make sure that you are not going to get yourself sued in any way, shape, or form. So bring a lawyer into it. If you're going to be doing anything that is more than the birthday parties we were just chatting about, make sure you have a lawyer looking over things before moving forward so that you are at least offered some level of protection as you are doing whatever really cool events you are doing, and we love to see your events. So if you have one, drop it down below. Let us know. Maybe come on and do an interview. We'll see you in those upcoming episodes, right? We could have a lot of fun with that one. So drop those questions down below. Let us know if you're going to be doing fun things. And as always, you can reach out to Tony on my social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor. You can check out my entertainment law podcast called End Scene, with new episodes dropping every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your questions down below because we want to make sure that the publishing industry is as fun as possible without infringing on anybody's rights. So now's the time to ask your legal questions and follow along for daily videos helping you navigate the world of publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most profitable year ever with the least amount of stress, overwhelm, and time commitment on the content you're creating. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.